You always know, here there is an issue, here there isn't, you get that kind of knowledge. So we've put our laws in place, we've put our policies in place, but over time people are beginning to learn what is true and what is not true. Our constitution, and I would say that is probably what guides us the most, says that we should have freedom of expression, freedom of press. So we cannot clamp down on people who are choosing to mislead others with their statements if first of all it's not proven false, and that's why there's a court process to take some of these people through. So I think it's a balance between the freedom of press and people exploiting those opportunities, and so it's a tough and balancing act that we're working on as regulators and as government. But of course, if it's about things like kidnapping, where somebody is exploiting children, those ones we don't wait. We deal with them immediately. Where there is crime, it's an immediate action. Then the courts come later. But where it's this freedom of expression, that's where it's a bit grey.
The dissemination of information. You're saying that narrative, according to you, is not really gaining ground, but you're not concerned that it could actually gain ground and become, get on the wildfire?
The country is peaceful. People are focusing on development. If you look at the papers and the things they're talking about, they're saying all the economic indicators are showing that things are green. There's still some work to be done, but we're moving forward. We've been fighting this whole pandemic of COVID, and the country is coming out of it. We've gone back to schools. Many things are happening that are positive. Surely they cannot be happening in that way if there's other issues. So as we speak, I can tell you without doubt, our country is peaceful. People are moving forward. They're looking at how to grow and recover what we've lost in 2020 because of this pandemic.
We are going very digital in many things as a country, as a continent, etc. But there still remains the concern about disparity. We've got, for example, if it's schools, there's someone who will be learning here in Nairobi and they'll have all the facilities, internet, strong 4G plus internet, to be able to access that. But we have those who can't even access internet.
We've got right now over 98% 2G coverage, the whole country, which allows people to have even basic services. We've got over 88% 3G coverage in the country. The other day I was in Turkana, where they don't even fiber hadn't reached in one of the centers, where it's an incubation center, co-working space. Many of the students there, young people, are studying in Australia. They go there, they log in, they do their courses in Australia, and usually it's at night, and they're just using the 4G, 3G signal that is available. This disparity is many moving parts. So the fact that someone has coverage of 4G doesn't mean they have a 4G device. Some will have, some will not. I think the issue of equality is something that is aspirational, and we continue to work very hard to ensure we have connectivity everywhere. We've put policies where we have the Universal Service Fund. This service fund is being used to ensure we are providing connectivity even in places where it's not economically viable. We've got a plan where we're looking at devices. So as a country, we're already now beginning to manufacture and produce our own devices. Actually, at Dedan Kimathi University of Science and Technology, we are exporting semiconductors to the US and to Japan. So as a country, we're becoming a producer of these devices, a manufacturer of these devices. So the cost and prices are coming down. And we hope in the next few years, then we'll have coverage everywhere. But even in the US or in Europe, they don't have 100% coverage. As a government, based on our constitution, we are striving as hard as possible to ensure everyone has equal access.
And so with what recourse is there in terms of, we saw Loon, Alphabet said that Loon is no longer a viable business, and so it was shadowed. And that was one of the things I believe the government was riding on to bring connectivity to the far-flung areas, etc. So where does that decision...
But it was not the only thing. We were still rolling out base stations. So if you look at USF, this is a Universal Service Fund, we were putting base stations all across the country. That was to supplement. It wasn't the only thing. We have got fiber in every county, in every sub-county, and we continue to expand that. We're working very closely now with Kenya Power and Ketraco and others to put fiber on all the places where we have the electric grid. And so that continues. Rollout of infrastructure continues. And
So
that's
did
why I'm
that set us
saying
back in any way?
it's not setting us back, but it would have been easier to use, a balloon and you cover 80 kilometers. Now we have to continue to build, so it means it will take a bit longer than that. But it's a private company, it's a private service that they were offering, so it's not something that government can control. If we could have bought it, we could have bought, but it's Alphabet, they take their decisions.
There's the young guys who are making robots. What is being done to kind of support, these young people who are coming up with some interesting innovations? I know there may be many, but this one was one that stood out and has been.
We're amazed at the skills and mindset that our young people have, trying to just innovate and innovate. And as a result of that, we created something called the Huduma White Box. And the Huduma White Box, think of it like a reception where anybody with an idea, with a plan, is able to bring that idea. We first of all give them legal advice on how to patent their idea so that they don't, it's not taken by anybody. We then assess, is it an idea, is it early stage, is it a business, and we look at ways of how we can support. So at the moment, for instance, together with the UK Tech Hub, together with UNDP, we have over 200 companies that we are incubating and helping, training them over 3-month programs. And in some of them, even at Konza, we're giving them grants so that they can be able to grow and build their businesses. So anyone going to whitebox.go.ke with the ideas that they have, they will be able to interact now with us. And we'll be able to ensure we're protecting their intellectual property and we're giving them all the guidance that they need so that they can expand and grow their businesses. We'll shortly be looking at how we can roll out even a fund, but through the NSE, so that even other Kenyans can invest in the Silicon Savannah. Africans, everybody can come and participate. But that's a program we're putting in place that will help all these innovators raise capital.
Anything else you'd like to add in regards to this summit?
I would say I'm very pleased again, and thank you, Nation, for setting up this summit and for allowing us to actually have these very nice debates that allow us to move the country and the continent forward. I think this digital space creates a humongous opportunity for us to transform the continent, to give our young people meaningful work, to give them opportunities to grow from just being earners of wages to owners of capital, where they can really grow the continent. We've created an opportunity where there's this whole continent now with the Continental Free Trade Area, where you've got over 1.3 billion market. That's a huge market of which we can be able to export, whether it is skills, technologies. We can even import from ourselves so that we can just improve and make Africa better, make Kenya better. And so I look forward to more and more interactions and getting a good report from what is taken on. Nation, congratulations again on launching Nation.Africa and ensuring that you're putting now a spotlight on the continent and that you ensure that this conversation continues. So thank you very much and look forward to interacting again soon.
Thank you very much, Waziri, for speaking.
All right, that was CS
God bless.
Joe Musheru, who was CS Joe Musheru, who was speaking to us in regards to this conference and the issues that are inherent in the digital space. And just to point out, he was very deliberate about dressing in a way that he'll feel like he's in Mombasa. That's one of the things he told us when we got to his place where we're going to have the interview. So he could feel a bit Mombasa-ish. So that was part of his agenda. And just for the sake of those who are with us here physically, just to remind us to ensure that our phones are on silent, just to avoid any disruptions. Remember the usual COVID containment rules that we have advised that we should observe as much as we can. And also just to ensure that those who are here, Makutano Conference Hall is where we have our bathrooms, just in case you may need those. And so now at this point, I'd like to invite the chairman of the Council of Governors ICT Committee, Paul Chepkwony, who is also, that's Professor Paul Chepkwony, who's also the governor of Kericho County, to give us some remarks before we get into the discussion.
Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth, Joe Musheru, Chief Executive Officer, Nation Media Group, Stephen Gitagama, development partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name, as you've heard, is Professor Paul Kiprono Chepkwony, the Governor of Kericho, and Chair ICT at the Council of Governors. So I'm here on behalf of the Council of Governors as well. I wish to commend the Nation Media Group for convening and spearheading this timely conversation on digital economy in Kenya. The Nation Africa Digital Summit will make headway in identifying gaps and necessary interventions in strengthening the digital economy in the country. The theme of the summit, quote, digital competitiveness in a flat world, end of quote, juxtaposes the all-rounded dynamics in the establishment of a robust digital economy in the country. The national and county governments bear joint responsibility in deploying the infrastructure, personnel, and capacity to ensure full internet penetration in the country. The Constitution of Kenya brought with it the opportunity for reforms in the information, communication, and technology sector, and laying strategies for the establishment of a dynamic digital economy. I'm proud to report that the county governments have offered tremendous support through the creation of an enabling environment for the digital economy in Kenya. Indeed, this session on government facilitation and preparedness for digital economy highlights the key role that the county governments play in enhancing and accelerating economic development in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of the above, allow me to report as follows. Last year, the county governments launched and are currently implementing the county COVID-19 socio-economic reengineering recovery strategy, which seeks to guide counties on bouncing back in various sectors that were hard hit by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The strategy proposes enhancing ICT capacity for business continuity and investing in human resource development. Further, it envisaged that ICT will play a critical role in institutionalizing monitoring, evaluation, regular reporting, and communication to the grassroots level. All county governments have established a dedicated department dealing with ICT. The departments support the implementation of ICT programs across all counties and coordinating multi-sectoral stakeholder engagement towards the establishment of strong digital economies. 3. 44 county government headquarters have been connected to the national fiber optic backbone. This project has been adopted by all county governments, and it aims at easing communications across counties as well as improved government service delivery to all citizens. This accounts for the increased internet penetration rate of 85.2%, the second highest in Africa. 36 county governments have deployed automated county revenue collection systems, which have enhanced So 36 county governments have deployed automated county revenue system. Six county governments have deployed automated county revenue collection systems, which have enhanced own source revenue collected by county governments. The increased revenue collections have enhanced service delivery across these counties. 5. County governments have embraced the use of digital systems through use of video and audio-based communication platforms such as WebEx, Zoom, and Teams to organize and coordinate county meetings and activities successfully. This was showcased when the Council of Governors held a successful COVID-19 virtual conference that had a virtual attendance of up to 5,000 participants on various digital platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, county governments are not devoid of challenges, and the following are challenges. Most of the digital technology requires specific skills, and county governments lack these from time to time. I urge the private sector and national government to partner with the counties to enhance the capacity of county staff. As earlier mentioned, only 44 county headquarters are connected to national fiber optic. This has affected the network coverage in the remaining 3 counties. This lowers the number of investors who would want to invest in the affected counties. I want to urge the national government to fast-track the connection of national fiber optic in these 3 counties and further connect the sub-counties to the internet grid. There is inadequate resourcing of ICT projects in counties. However, as county governments, we are committed to increase budget allocation to ICT. Additionally, digital technology continues to contribute to an increase in electronic waste. I urge the private sector to partner with county governments in ensuring safe disposal of digital waste. Despite these challenges, county governments offer a conducive environment for digital partnership with local and international ICT partners with an aim to develop a fair and inclusive digital economy that leaves no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have elaborated earlier, I cannot belabor the commitment by county governments in enhancing the development of our digital economy as a country. Our achievements and challenges reflect on the promise by all county governments to the citizens of Kenya to enhance service delivery and opportunities for socio-economic development at community level. In conclusion, on behalf of the Council of Governors, I express my gratitude to the Nation Media Group and all stakeholders present for all efforts towards supporting the digital economy. It is my sincere hope that this summit will yield necessary deliverables. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Governor Chepkonyi, for that. And just to give us a good feel of what exactly should expect. And now we're going to be having our first panel discussion. And even as we do that, just to remind those of us who are here physically that the username of the password, I beg your pardon, the Wi-Fi is Digital Summit. And the password is 12345678. From 1 to 8, that is the password. So Digital Summit 12345678. And so that is what you could use to stay online with us. Reminding you that the hashtag we're using is Nation Digital Summit. Hashtag Nation Digital Summit. Let's have the conversation going on even online. Now, I'm joined by my panelists for the first discussion, and it's good to say that we have the gender balance and the gender requirement met on this panel. And because we have our social distancing, I would request Madam Fauzia to, yes, thank you very much. And first and foremost is a gentleman who was just speaking. That is the chairman of the ICT Committee of the Council of Governors, as well as the governor of Kericho, Professor Paul Chepkonyi. Then we also have next to him Fauzia Ali Kimanthi, who's the head of Department, Digital Products and Services at Safaricom. And last but not least, we have Louis Otieno, who's the chairman of the Strategy and Investment Committee of the Nation Media Group. Thank you very much for being with us here. I'll just again begin with you, Governor. Many people may not know that you're one of the people who have the most patents in terms of some innovations. Maybe you could just give us a brief on what are these innovations that you've come up with and patented?
Thank you very much, panel. Actually, I am a professor of pharmaceutical chemistry. And in chemistry, there is an aspect of system administration which is used to interpret structures in chemicals that are isolated in case you are researching on chemicals. So I have 13 patents, 6 of which are American patents, 4 are European patents, 1 Japanese, 1 Kenyan, 1 South African, and we are currently working on a Filipino patent. So patents are documents that are generated to protect innovations. And the way to protect an invention, and the only way, is patenting. And when you have an invention, there are benefits to it. And the reason, first of all, for patenting is to make sure that no thief steals it. So one of the reasons for patenting is to protect your invention from thieves. Second, you can sell your invention and make money. And thirdly, you can implement the invention yourself and make business out of it. So the question you've asked me is around the 13 patents that I have, and this is something that is very important for us, that every time you invent something, the first thing to do is to patent it. Because when you don't patent and it gets to public domain, you invalidate patentability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to bring in Louis, and we are looking at some of the wins in the digital space for Africa, because we've always been seen to be behind, but now we are sort of on an equal platform with the rest of the world. From where you sit, what do you feel are some of the wins that Africa has gained through this, with COVID having thrust us into a whole new level of interaction with the digital space?
Thanks, Dad. I think you heard CS Musheru and also Prof talk about the internet penetration that we have already in Kenya. And I want to thank everybody who has worked towards achieving that, because it set us up for success in a world where effectively you were able to interact and engage and do business remotely. If we did not have that situation, we'd be struggling right now. I know companies in this country today that are basically providing services for European and American partners as a result of that. So that's the fundamental, okay? I also always talk about, following what Prof has talked about here in terms of innovation, that Africa is not necessarily, I say we are blessed with challenges. People like to look at them as problems. I look at them as challenges because I find that African challenges are so fundamental, and that if you solve those, you tend to solve the problems of the world. And so in the environment we're in now, as we solve our challenges, we begin to offer solutions for the rest of the world. And I think what Prof is talking about is important, that as we do that, it's important that we claim the intellectual property that comes with that. So the long and the short is, good work has been done in terms of infrastructure. We are benefiting from affordable technologies now in terms of access, devices. We have a relatively good skill base in terms of our young people. And I say that we're blessed with lack of fear. We don't know what we don't know, right? And so we're willing to try new things. And I think what COVID has done is create an environment that's conducive for us to thrive. So I'll say it that way.
Thank you very much, Louis. I'd like to bring in Fauzia, and for you as Safaricom, you're considered some of the front runners when it comes to the ICT space. What do you feel the disruption, so to speak, that COVID brought and the way it thrust us into a whole new space of digital? What do you think that has done for us as Africa, that even you as Safaricom were yet to probably have achieved, and if you are pushed into that space further?
Thanks, Dan, for the questions. And happy to be here. So I think the COVID, to be very honest, was a disruption for many of us. But I think what was positive, if I can look for that silver lining, was that the level with which we were able to adapt to that situation is probably what has brought many of us where we are, and we have learnt a lot in the process. So for instance, if I can pick some of the sectors that we work with that we saw great disruptions and we've seen great strides. In the area of education, we provide service to quite a lot of the campuses and universities from an infrastructure perspective. And at the time when COVID hit, quite a number of them were just preparing for exams and getting into the graduation season. But COVID hit and everybody was like, okay, fine, so what do we do? So there was a moment of being stuck, but immediately after that, campus, we engaged, actually we started a pilot with Strathmore and offered a very simple solution where students could still be able to access learning from home. And very quickly, more than 70 learning institutions picked it up. And quite a number have proceeded to actually graduate students. In fact, in the last summit we were in for education, one of the professors for JKUAT was saying now they've changed and they will not be entirely learning in school. It will definitely be a hybrid solution. So already you can see evolution happening in the education sector. If we see, I think where we've seen significant growth is in financial services, where now more and more services, many, many more, even the ones probably who were struggling to sell M-Pesa to, now are saying the only mode of payment is, mobile money, whichever the situation could be, whether it's through a card or through M-Pesa. And we've seen significant growth in the levels of M-Pesa transactions, in the levels of customers transacting on M-Pesa. So financial services in itself has grown by leaps and bounds. But I think fundamental is when you have the infrastructure, it's now the traffic that you start seeing coming through. We saw our mobile data traffic almost doubling in that period. We saw our home connections growing by nearly 25%. But all this was to support those who are working from home and those who are learning from home. So I think the opportunities it has brought about is that there are some ecosystems that we need to leverage on and now are embedded in our strategy. So for instance, how can we support the health sector? How can we further support the education sector? And how can we further support agriculture with the digital infrastructure to be able to thrive?
Okay, thank you very much. Governor, when she speaks, you could hear some very promising things in regards to if it's the schools that we have or otherwise. But the reality is that we have some areas in the country which may not be privileged enough to have that kind of access to internet. So it sort of puts them at a disadvantage. Check, can you hear me? Yeah, so Governor, we know that initially there were some plans by various counties to even roll out free Wi-Fi across the county, but it has not happened. Maybe, I know some of the infrastructure is national government, but from the county level, what can you do to ensure that? Because again, education is a devolved function, and so you'll find there's a child in Nairobi who's going to be going to school online, but in the rural areas it may not be the same. What has been done to try and bridge this gap?
Thank you very much, Chair of the panel. I would like to say that education is a concurrent function where the component of ECD lies with the county governments, and the primary to university is with the national government. To solve this problem, we need concerted effort. We need the county government to work with the national government, and we tap in also the support of the private sector. The strategy is to make sure that the counties do their part as much as possible, supported by the national government. The most difficult part is infrastructure, which, if the national government can put in place, would make it very easy for counties to supplement and avail the facilities that are that can roll out connectivity in schools. So the way to solve this problem is multi-sectoral approach, and I've said that we need quite a number of players to come in and support this kind of initiative. Thank you.
All right. Maybe, Lou, you could just chime into this whole conversation about reducing the disparity gap that we have. What needs to be done? He's pointed out, I'd just like to also get some of your thoughts as a person who's been in the private sector and you've worked with multinationals and the likes.
Hello. Yes, I think Prof is right. The fundamental is infrastructure. To have parity, you need infrastructure and you need universal infrastructure. You need high-speed, low-cost connectivity on in all parts of this country. Some of the work that's already been done in terms of NOFB is appreciated, but it's only so far that can go. We need to use new technologies. You may be familiar with dynamic spectrum allocation, or also known as TV white spaces, which uses TV spectrum to provide connectivity where you normally would not be able to provide connectivity. That's high-speed, low-cost connectivity, and it's something that we should embrace in order for us to do so. So that's a classic example. There are parts of the world that have enough penetration, they don't need this kind of stuff. But here in Africa, where we have a large landmass, we need to be leading, both in terms of policy development around use of something like TV white spaces, but most importantly in terms of deployment and utilization. And that's the opportunity for innovation by some of our young people.
Fauzia, there's many things that we've seen and you've mentioned as well that have come out of all this. How do we make these sustainable, even for small businesses that are going to begin adopting new things? Like you've said, there are some who initially didn't want your mobile money services, for instance. How do we make sure that this is sustainable so that it's not a thing that works today, tomorrow, then when we get to next week, it's not working? Especially considering the online space is very dynamic.
I think for me, sustainability always comes from, and then picking from something that Louis said, comes from what problem are we trying to solve? Because if you think about how M-Pesa started, it was all about there was a problem and necessity actually bred invention. So what problem are you trying to solve? Because if you actually solve a fundamental problem, it will become sustainable. Let me take an example. So if you look at our creative industry, quite a number of the young content creators have now moved to digital channels. And they have seen a fantastic opportunity to actually monetize on their content, besides maybe thinking about doing a live play or putting it on traditional TV, just opening up the opportunities. So for instance, even if you have a show on TV, like for example, Maria, that same show would be on a digital space. I can find it on YouTube. I can find it on Viusasa. So it's about, if whatever it is about meeting a need, then it becomes sustainable. So there's a great need for entertainment. So how do we deliver it in a way that consumers can access it when they want, how they want, whenever they want? There's a great need to access education. How do we support that? Yes, so for example, if an area doesn't have internet, I actually saw a place in Taita Taveta, or is it Bungoma actually, when we went to launch a library, And KICD actually had a very good initiative where they had used the tablet and downloaded all the content on that tablet. So yes, there's no internet, yes, but there's power, there's a tablet, children can be able to access in a library. So I think it's also about adapting with your current situation, but focusing on meeting the need. Think about Fuliza. Fuliza was about bringing dignity at the point of purchase so that I don't have to keep asking or returning things when I'm at the supermarket. So it happens seamlessly. You don't know that I've paid with Fuliza, but I've made a payment. So what happens with a solution like that is that immediately the adoption and the acceptance becomes quite widespread. So we have a lot of problems in Kenya, in Africa, and I think it's about identifying what is that problem we're really trying to solve and be simple about it. Just be simple in solving it, and it will become sustainable. So I think it's just about identifying the problem, but using technology to solve the problem.
And make these developments more sustainable, just from where you sit.
Thank you very much for that question. Kenyans are very creative. Especially the youth of Kenya, they are very creative, and I want to say that they are among the leading in the world. What they require is support in the following areas. The national government needs to put research fund aside so that all these creative youths can access research fund that they can use to develop anything that they've invented. Number two, we have a dysfunctional intellectual property in Kenya, property office in Kenya, which needs to be strengthened to protect inventions that come out of the country. KIPI needs to be strengthened with resourcing. Our universities too need to be resourced by the national government to a tune of at least 2% of the GDP. We are the only county which doesn't fund research in the universities as much as it should. So if we dedicate a lot of funding to research, the youth who are very creative can really find something to do, and we will push inventions into a higher level in this country. But finally, we need also a conversation on how to protect our inventions. One of the biggest problems is that Kenyans are also very excited. Somebody invents something, and the most important thing he does immediately is to go to the newspapers. The basic tenet of inventions is to make sure that you keep quiet until it is filed. But getting excited and breaking the story very quickly invalidates patentability. So Kenyans need to be taught to keep quiet until every invention that is possibly patentable is on file. It doesn't really matter what invention it is, but the basic trait of an inventor is when you have an invention, don't share it with anybody, even your girlfriend or even your wife, don't until it is filed. You know, especially men are very excited. You invent a bicycle, and the first thing you do is to tell your girlfriend. But you see, the moment it is in public domain, you invalidate patentability. Because when you are asked to disclose, you will say, you'll be asked, who else knows it? You will say, Jane knows it. And the moment that you say that, that invention is invalidated immediately. Thank you.
All right. Prof is challenging some people's, home discussions. Siambia tabibi. Louis, I want to just bring you in again, and like has been mentioned, how can Africa now use this opportunity? And I know it's partly what I'd mentioned, to sort of be independent and not really rely on, the Western world, especially now that we've got this. It's kind of tied to what I asked you initially, but how can we get some independence that we're not overly reliant on, the West or otherwise for support and growth?
Well, I think that the first thing we need to recognize is our sheer size. Africa is 1 point something billion people right now. Yet if you look at our trade, intra-Africa trade, that is our ability to transact with each other, we are in somewhere like 15%, right? So that means we are trading with the rest of the world at 85%. When you compare it with Europe's 70-something%, Asia's 60%, and even North America's 40%, there's a lot of upside in terms of trading, okay? Just to put that in perspective, if we increased our intra-Africa trade by, say, 2 points, from 15 to 17%, that's more money into Africa than we get in a single year, than we get from donors and FDIs. So we do need to trade with ourselves. So the question becomes, why aren't we doing that? And then we start getting to the crux of the issue, lack of infrastructure, lack of cohesive policies, etc. The reason why Africa is unattractive, despite its 1.3 billion people, relative to China and India, is in order for you to have a policy conversation in Africa, you need to have it 50 times. You need to have it with 50 different governments, okay? As opposed to having it with China, having it with India. It makes it extremely uninteresting. And so one of the things we need to do is leverage things like Africa Union, Pan-African organizations, to start dealing with some of these fundamentals so that we can create a market for ourselves. Because if we do so, then there should be no reason why a young person in Kenya is not innovating to solve a problem in Botswana. And a young person in South Africa is not beginning to address issues in Egypt and things like those. So we need to do so. We need to have regimes that allow for standardization around intellectual property protection and stuff like that. That's what we mean by that. So I go back to what I said earlier on. Africa is blessed with challenges. We need to present those challenges to all our youth. We need to have parity in terms of infrastructure, in terms of policy, in terms of opportunity for these youth to start solving our problems, because by solving our problems, we start to solve the problems of the world. And it's back to what you're saying. We have enough work to do in Africa. We just need to compensate our young people and innovators for the work that they do here.
Right, and I want to throw a question that all the panelists will pick up on, and this is about one of the things that have been raised is the need to change culture. So, there's the digital space which is changing a lot, but there are some of us who still want to stay in the old way of doing things. We are still staying in the old way of doing things, but we are getting new tools and new platforms on the internet. How do we change that culture? Because that might be one of the hardest things to do, because we are seeing innovations coming up every day, but we are not seeing a commensurate adaptation of these kind of platforms because of culture. There are people through the pandemic who realize you can actually work from home and you don't need to come to the office. But then you see concerns that, well, we've been forced to come to the office again, yet it was efficient then. So how do we change this kind of culture? It feels like it's a conundrum in itself. I'll begin with Fauzia, then I'll come to Louis, then Governor.
Okay. Well, I think it's an interesting question, but I think if I reflect on maybe Safaricom and the journey that we've been on, one of the things that HR now has been telling us about is three things, especially when you transition from what we call the traditional way of doing things to the digital way of doing things. Our strategy now for 2025 is to be the leading, to transition to a technology company. So to move from a telecommunication company to a technology company. And what our HR director says is that we need three things. It first needs to start in the mind. So there's mindset, then skill set, and then tool set. So I think the first thing is, are we able to shift our mind and our thinking to the new reality? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing, are we willing to actually maybe recognize that we don't know and that probably we need a bit of training? Yeah, let's not assume that we know. So what are some of the skills that we need to pick to be able to adapt to this new world? one of the things that we are learning in the organization is how to run things in what we call the agile methodology. You don't have to wait until you build the whole project to the end to launch it. Look at the small incremental improvements that you can be able to show so that the customer can start experiencing the benefit. And then give people sort of like a toolkit, things that they need to be able to survive in this new world. So I think that's what we need to do. So yes, if the infrastructure is there, we need to enable people. Do people have the right devices? Let's start there. So let's say, for instance, we are saying something simple like transport. Before you're used to maybe approaching it in a certain way, now there's Uber. So how do you show someone how to do that? I mean, literally, you have to train the person. So I mean, if I reflect on it with my mom, I actually had to show her, Mom, if you want to go somewhere, it's very easy. Downloaded for her the app. This is how you actually hail a cab. Now, she's in her 70s. And just like Louis said, we have no fear as long as someone shows us how to do it. We have zero fear. Because we're like, what's the alternative? I walk. My mom is aged. So she'll call for the cab. So we just have to be able to skill. Give us those, what are those basic skills that we need to actually be able to maneuver in this digital space? And then what are some of those tools, 1, 2, 3, that we need to be able, so the first thing I think is we need to be agile. It's changing all the time. It's disruptive. What I knew last year and what I know now is different, and COVID has even taught us that. So I think there's something around those 3 things that could probably help us navigate.
It's an interesting question, Dan. I think COVID has created the crisis that demands that the interaction between customers, people, and businesses changes. And as that does, and business begins to offer the services and products that a new customer who has different expectations it starts to reinforce a change in culture, okay? I can tell you right now, you may not be aware of it, but if you come too close to me now, I'll push you away. Last year, 2 years ago, I would have loved, you would have been very close to me and I wouldn't have mind, but now, COVID has created that situation. That's just in terms of change in personal space. But let me take a different angle to this. We now have a situation because of COVID that basically says customers have discovered ways and means to get services, and they have other options, okay? So companies need to change. Customers have moved, right? Let me talk about Nation because of the work I do over here. I can tell you that as Nation we were talking about digital transformation, but it was almost, at our pace. COVID has basically said, you don't have that luxury, you need to move to survive, okay? You can't survive by selling newspapers at the corner because the government prohibits newspaper people from selling newspapers. You have to consume this in a digital way. I can assure you, our customers have gone digital and they're not coming back this way. That's an example. But it also creates an opportunity for Nation to reach its aspirations. We were targeting 100 million people through nation.co.ke from a digital point of view. We have now shifted to nation.africa, which creates an opportunity for 1 billion people. Our content needs to reflect that. We're now dealing with 1 billion people as our market, right? So the long and the short is that we now have, because of technology, ability to reach more people. We now have, because of technology, ability to make some money from more people. And we now have, through technology, ability to engage those people in different ways. If we were previously dealing with people through newspaper, radio, TV, we now have digital, and we now have events like this to be able to engage with people. And as we do that, and we start offering customers more and more, because customers expect to consume our content in different ways, we are going to adapt, right? And that's a fun way of changing culture, individual culture and business culture. So I just want to end it that way.
Governor, we come to you, and where I'm keen on this is because there's the perception that government officials are the ones who want to do things in an old school way. There's the stereotypes and attempts which are jokes, about someone comes, hangs their coat, anaenda zake atarudi baadaye. How do we change this kind of culture, especially because of the need? The private sector, like you said, is already picking up. How will the governments stay in step?
Thank you very much, Chair. There is nothing about having some good character because you're working in government or you're working in private sector. Government employees need to recognize that we are in a competitive world where time is money. So the way to do it is inculcate the culture of business from when we have these young ones in school. We need to introduce it from primary school so that people understand that whether you are working in government or you are working for the private sector, you are working for business. And it is a very embarrassing system. When you mention that way, it is really very embarrassing. But all is not lost. I know that with the yardsticks that have been put in place in government, performance contracting especially, is something that we sort out that. In fact, the way to do it is to make sure that performance contracting is the way to go in government, so that you are paid for what you've done, you are paid for what you are worth. So that way, if you hang your coat for 30 minutes, you lose your worth for 30 minutes. So that is what my view is. Thank you.
All right, and just in closing, Louis, when you look at the corporate scene right now in Kenya, and with the changes that are happening, how would you think it will look like in the next 10 years? Because we are having, the real estate right now is booming, but it seems that to some extent we are going to be relying less on physical buildings, it seems. So where do you think, we'll be in the next, say, 10 years? What do you think it looks like?
Okay, so first of all, I think COVID has given us a glimpse of the future. Let's start with that. I think technology is going to be center to a lot of human interaction, both socially as well as work, right? So I expect, I think I shared this before somewhere else, the emergence of clusters of neighborhoods and cities like metropolis, where somebody doesn't have to move from one end of a town or a city to go to the other end to get a service. They would either get that service physically where they are, or they'd have access to that service digitally. So probably less. So there's a possibility, hopefully, that there'll be less cars on the road. We wish, okay? Because you should be able to consume the services the way we are being forced to. So I envision that kind of situation. The same thing with work. I expect employment, particularly for our young people, to be around delivering services across the world. It's no longer delivering a service for somebody in your neighborhood or around. You should be able to deliver digital-oriented services all over the place. The question is, how do we find out where those opportunities exist? So just long and the short is, services including media, government, Safaricom services, Safaricom is already used to this, is going to be consumed digitally, and I expect a lot more to be done that way. And even those that are not digital, like buying a fruit or whatever, it's no longer you going to get it. I expect it to be brought to you, for example, and then therefore you would have an improvement of quality of life, or you'd have basically more opportunity to work to make a living as a result of that. But I wanted just to make a comment about something very important that Prof has said around the whole thing of research. And I'd like to provoke us. If you told me to stop speaking now, I would end with this. And that is to say, innovation is local. Innovation is local. And I would challenge us, particularly local government, much as we are demanding central government to commit 2% of GDP towards R&D. Notwithstanding the fact that it's not an obligation right now, I certainly in Kericho would hope that some of the money that's devolved deliberately goes towards Kericho-based solutions solving, because if there's enough of that going on, then we don't have to wait for the central government. The central government is not necessarily going to be seeing the challenges and opportunities as much as local governments would do it. So I would challenge our governors to commit a certain amount of what they get towards R&D, specifically around activating our young people to solve problems locally.
Thank you. Governor, just to respond to that, do you have any, what amount of your budget goes into getting Kericho-specific solutions?
Well, money is limited, but we do what we have to do to make sure that we provide a budget for ICT. And the ICT minister is here. I don't want to ask her, but we put a significant amount of money to develop our ICT centers. And by the way, Kericho has put up a data center, which is meant to secure documents, security, and for data storage. And we have a 64 terabyte data center. Think about the second one in the country after Nairobi. So we are able to digitize all our records and keep them safely. So we are safe from fire. Number two, we are focused on developing the youth, and especially along the digital direction. So next year, if you don't mind, we would like to invite you and Nation Media Group to host this for you in Kericho next year. But to answer your question, we have no option but to deliberately invest in youth. We must fund research and development, and we make sure that we protect any invention that comes out of every youth. Even if we fund inventions and we don't protect them, we are doing zero work, because we have scouts who will be coming to conferences. They get good ideas from Kenyans and they steal it. Look at the Siondo. It's a Kenyan invention, but it is now Japanese. And that is why I emphasize the fact that the media should play a role in educating Kenyans on the need to be cautious when we make inventions until we patent. It is only when you patent that your invention is safe, because you have the ability to sue the person who steals it. But if you are just saying you have invented a robot and there is no patent to it, that is zero work. So what Louis is saying, I agree with him. We must do the most important things for this country. And that one is making sure the youth become the leading inventors in the world, which they are. We only need to support them a little bit and we become a superpower. And I think Kenya 10 years from now will be a superpower. I believe with the aggressiveness of our youth and the intellectual capacity that they have, we have a very bright future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. And unfortunately, we've run out of time for these sessions. A lot more we could have delved into, but we need to get to the next session. So once again, thank you very much to Louis, Fauzia, and Professor Chepkonyi. And we're going to be having a presentation virtually from Francois Nel, who's
who's the Media Innovations and Entrepreneurship Associate Professor. That's at the University of Central Lancashire. He's going to be speaking to us and giving a presentation on a digital world, which is a view from Mars. How it look like when you look at it, when you're from out of Earth and you look down and see what the digital world looks like. That is what he's going to be giving to us, and this is going to cover the aspect of media innovations, because with digital comes a lot of the media engagements on the same, and media not being the traditional media we've always thought about. It also includes the new media, such as social media, as well as entrepreneurship, and how you can actually have that entrepreneurship conversation going on, and the efforts of entrepreneurship to make them sustainable, as we've said here, and to make them vibrant using the digital space, which is an inevitable thing to go by. So I'm just going to now turn our focus to the screens. I thank our panelists for joining us. I would request you to have your seats. Thank you very much. Let's appreciate them. The hand clap. Thank you very much. So once again, like I said, we are going to be having Francois Nel, Media Innovations and Entrepreneurship Associate Professor at the University of Central Lancashire, who's going to be giving us a presentation on a digital world, a view from Mars. Francois.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you. I just trust everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to just share some slides with you, which I hope will help us with this conversation. So I'm actually not coming to you from Mars. I'm coming to you today from Cape Town. And I think in there is already a part of the story, that I'm in Cape Town today. I'm coming to you from a co-working space where I have rented an office in near the V&A, the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, because I've been locked down here. Partly by choice, but also because my flights from South Africa to the UK were cancelled, so I was locked up. And so it's been an interesting opportunity for me to reflect personally, as we all have, on how the pandemic is changing the world, but also what are some of the opportunities. So what I'd like to, I think, touch on today, just to tell you a little bit about my day job. My work at the University of Central Lancashire is really around working on digital transformation with media companies. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And worked on with companies like News UK, moving for 2.5 years, running their digital leaders program in-house as they were developing their skills. We've worked with some of the companies in South Africa and elsewhere. And part of my work is also I do the annual World Press Trends for the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers. And just double checking, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. Carry on, Francois.
Okay, I just got a message there from people that I can't hear heard. So what I'd like to do, I think, today is just give you a little bit of a view of what we're learning in the media world and what that might help businesses in Kenya and elsewhere think about as they navigate this flat world and digital opportunities. So here's what we'll be telling people this week in the World Press Print, where we kind of take stock of what's happened over the last year and some predictions for the future. So what has happened? In the overall revenues in the media have declined. Circulation is down in print revenues, advertising revenues are down, print audiences are down, but there has been growth in digital. Digital advertising is up, digital circulations are up, and digital revenues are up. And what we're, in terms of audiences, we've seen globally more or less the same story, as you can see from those slides. Our audiences are moving away from traditional print circulations globally. I know in Kenya it's been folks at Nation and Standard and other papers have felt it very heavily as well. But we've seen this steady decline. And it's not just it's been happening over time, of course, but the interesting thing that we're seeing going forward is that for the media business, who have been talking about digital transformation now for 20 years, information systems, they have watched this decline happening. But I think one of the previous speakers said, the customers have moved to digital, but have the businesses done that? Well, when we look at this, we can see that the customers have moved to digital, but when we look at revenues, we can see that the businesses haven't been able to capitalize on. And that's a kind of general picture. And then we might say, wow, is there anything we can do about this? This is happening around the world? Are there some people who are managing to buck the trend? And that's been the key interest for me, is thinking about the performance within the media business. Why are some people doing better than others? And I've been asking that question for a long time, and here it might be just some background data that might help you understand it. 10 years ago, after the last global recession, we asked people, how much has your revenue changed over the last 12 months? And the blue line you'll see there at the back was more than 50% of the people said that their revenues were down more than 30%. And for some people, it was much higher. But at a very, very small percentage, about 5% said their revenues had actually grown. 5 years ago, as people were recovering, we saw much fewer people were declaring declines, and bulk of the people were either down a little or up a little, but they were still, the people who were reporting profits in the media were still about 5-6%. People who were reporting big profits, between up to 10 and 20 and beyond. In this recession, we have seen more than 15% of the people. So that's kind of 1 in 7 who've said that despite these harsh trading conditions, their profits are up more than 20%. And on the left-hand side, you'll see there's also a greater number of people who have seen their profits completely disappear. What has happened here? Why is that the case? Well, it has to be because people have transformed their businesses at different paces. And we have been asking this question to find out to what extent are people knowing that the future is there and that the audiences are moving. To what extent are they actually transforming their businesses? I was listening to you, some of the panelists earlier, and it's fascinating. But what we've seen in the media industry, and this might be instructive, I hope for you, is that when we ask people over the next 12 months, what percentage of your overall revenues will need to come from other sources to meet your company's objectives? We've seen in the past, we saw about 25% of people said less than 10% of my revenues are going to come from new sources, new digital and other sources. We called the middle group the Rangers. But most people said, I need between 11 and 50%, almost half. And the small group of people were the pioneers, who said they needed about 14%, 15% of their revenues would need to come from alternative sources. What we've seen this time around is that there is a hardening of people who are saying they're going to defend their existing revenues, their traditional, in our instance, print, but you might think of any other business, their traditional non-digital revenue streams, and a whole, a large increase in people. In fact, 67%, if you put those two numbers together, are rangers or pioneers, people who are saying we have to move to digital. So we're seeing a small hardening of people who are defending the old ways, and a much more enthusiastic group who are saying they will move on. When we ask them, what is your highest priority for the next year? We've been asking this for every year now for over 10 years. What's the single but most important change that your company has to implement in your organization of the next year? What's the single biggest change? It's not surprising that digital transformation strategy acceleration is the single biggest or is the top priority for most of our, or the majority of the people in our offices. The next one is getting reader revenues, and we know that the Nation and others are moving along that and getting subscription, digital subscriptions, and finding other ways not just to be digital, but to monetize digital. And there's a whole range of other options there. What is interesting is that in the media industry, only 3% said that the most important priority, biggest change they had to do this year was cut costs. That is partly because it's played out in different parts of the world. But media companies around the world have been cutting costs quite dramatically over the last 10 years. Certainly since the recession, we've seen major drops in headcount and integration of different services and activities in order to reduce expenses and payroll in particular. So people around the world are no longer prioritizing cost cutting, thinking that they are going to get out of the hole they're in, partly from pandemic, through cost reductions. They are actually thinking about what can they do to transform their businesses, accelerate their strategies in order to take advantage of the opportunities that the shift to digital of customers is offering. But I'm always interested in finding out are the priorities of high-performing companies the same as those of low-performing companies? Because I ask this question all the time to see, do people who are winners make the same decisions as those who are not? And there are always differences. There are always clear strategic decisions that high-performing companies make that low-performing companies don't. What was interesting in this, when we looked at those who were reporting profits and those who were reporting losses as our measure, we found that digital transformation, acceleration, was a priority for everybody, but even more so for low-performing companies. Even those who were suffering the greatest losses and not earning income felt even more urgency, which I think is a great thing. What was interesting to me around the two areas that the high-performing and the low-performing companies were different was in the one, low-performing companies were saying that they needed to accelerate their data analytics and intelligence. And this is a really interesting one for me, because high-performing companies have data and make decisions around using evidence to guide their decision-making. Low-performing companies are realizing, not only do I have to transform, but I really have to wrap my head around measuring my performance using data. And I think in terms of your companies, and this is true, I think, not just for media, but for all companies, wrapping their head around using data to measure performance, digital data to measure performance, and decision-making is important. I think the other one that stood out for me, and it's just that the high-performing companies were more likely to say that they would want to have people share or create membership or reader donations models for their digital content. Now, I think that is a really interesting one for me, because high-performing companies believe that their product is so good that people will give them money, that the customer will set a price and donate to them because they feel it's a fair exchange of value. And I think that that's the other important thing that perhaps other companies can take from this as well. Digital transformation, of course, and we've heard it before, is not just about changing the operations, but it begins and ends with how you engage and you think about your customers and how you engage with your customers. And media companies who are high performing have such confidence or greater confidence in their content that they don't have to sell it, but they actually think that their customers would give them money in exchange for that, and that would be workable. Just a couple of other reflections of the many data points that I thought might be helpful for you. We asked people around the world, as you look ahead in the workplace options, which of the workplace options do you anticipate? Quite a lot of that came out already today, but 33% of the people around the world said they will be giving people the option to work from home or in the office. So a third of the people around the globe are saying they'll do so. I'm not sure what that's like in Kenya, but obviously that has implications for management. It means that you manage performance, not presence. It's not about clocking in, it's about delivery. And that is new demands for old style management. Many people, at least a quarter, said they'll rely more on work from home models. I think it was raised by one of the panelists before, but 16% of people said we'll use less real estate, and more people will outsource. Only 5% of the people said we'll move everyone back to the office. So I think it might be people here benchmarking their attitudes against this might be useful. I think the one of using less real estate is going to have a big implication for people everywhere. But there's unlikely to be the idea that people just want to work from home. I have a flat in Cape Town as well, and it's just up the road here. After 6 months of sitting in my flat and living and working there every day, I decided it was a really good idea to come to rent an office in a co-working space so I could get out and meet other people and things like that. So I think that we'll certainly see some hybrid models and other things emerging. Something that is an opportunity, I think. The reason I am in this co-working space is I've got guaranteed high-speed broadband. I've got 24-hour access. In South Africa, you might know there's some load shedding or electricity blackouts. I'm guaranteed a generator will work, and I won't have any power disruptions. And this has allowed me to do my job, which is normally I live in Manchester and I work in Preston, to do my work from here. And there have been tremendous benefits to doing that. Yesterday, I was, in the last of the week, I was running a leadership and innovation program for editors around the world across 12 time zones. We can work from anywhere, but we will choose to work from places where the infrastructure allows us to be stable. And I think that's a challenge, and it's a great opportunity. In Cape Town, I was speaking to an estate agent. They're talking about Zoom towns, villages around Cape Town, which have reliable infrastructure and all the services you need in order to work from there. So you don't have to work or live in the city, and you can access it as and when you need. I believe that will be also, we'll see Zoom countries. We used to see just outsourcing to China or outsourcing to Bangalore because of the bandwidth and things like that. I also think we will now see Zoom countries. And Kenya, South Africa, and other countries are really well placed to take advantage of that. I'm going to, but of course there are potholes to get from that to where you want to go. And this is thanks to the nation, but last year I was in Mombasa, and I couldn't help but notice how lovely the airport was and how great the hotel was and how terrible the roads were in between. So unless we can get the infrastructure together, there are definitely potholes around this. You've mentioned it before, but a view from Mars, you don't need. You just need to look at the numbers to see that the future is here in Kenya. You've got great opportunities, but it is, of course, still a great digital divide. We're talking about that everywhere. Countries that we speak to are terribly worried about this. And it's not just the economic problem. We are people who, through this pandemic, have realized the importance of digital access at an affordable price that is reliable, and are feeling more and more excluded. Those children who are forced to work from home, who can't access services because they don't have Wi-Fi, while their more affluent counterparts are accessing it, are even more disadvantaged than they ever have been. And I think that we all know that, and I hear you've been emphasizing that the importance of widespread digital access cannot be underestimated. I think the importance of that is leadership at political level, leadership at organizational level. I think there's room for optimism. The media organizations have felt in the main that their top management have responded appropriately. These have been really difficult times, but they feel they have. But that a lot of things will change. 87% of the people said the crisis has changed my organization in ways that will continue afterwards. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity to really jettison things that processes and workflows that haven't worked and should have been stopped, products that have been indulgent. The pandemic has provided us a great opportunity to do that. Most people are optimistic that their businesses will fully recover, but some may not. And I think that is something we need to see. I think this is just an old slide, but I just think another risk for Kenya, when we asked a year ago, we asked what's the greatest risk to the future success of news media in Kenya. The Kenyan editors said the biggest risk is corruption and interference from outside sources. And I think just if I would underline anything, the media in Kenya has played an incredibly important role in its society and its success. Whether it's corporates or politicians who are interfering with the media, to do so at great risk, because we have seen in our studies for UNESCO and otherwise that where the freer the press, or the press, a free press that is unencumbered and can operate without pressure and undue influence from powers, whether commercial powers or government. We see higher electoral integrity, higher rule of law, higher political stability, higher control of corruption, and all the other elements you can see there. We also see that in places where the press is free, there's much greater gender equality, access to education, and the like. And there is a reduction in social inequality. So you would expect me to say that, but I just think the last one I wanted to say is the economic impact of press freedom is also there. If Kenya is highly ambitious, and I heard somebody say that they want Kenya to grow as one of the global powerhouses. Absolutely. If you keep your press free and unencumbered from outside interference, you're likely to see higher direct foreign investment, higher manufacturing value, higher gross domestic capital, gross domestic income, and GDP per capita. And you'll see higher ease of business and lower poverty populations. The numbers are there, and we continue to see that. Where there is exceptions, we have outliers in that data, China, Saudi Arabia, and at this point Egypt. That is where policies from the West essentially enable those behaviors. And those are exceptionalism countries. For whatever reason, you all know why China and Saudi Arabia is an exception in policy. Kenya, I would say, is probably not one of those countries. I think you would need to really think about that. Great opportunities for Kenya, and I hope some of those lessons, while they were very media focused, would echo for some of you in the other industries.
Thank you very much, Francois. Let's appreciate it with a hand clap. Quite an insightful presentation there, especially for those of us in the media space, and even in principle to those who also are in the different other businesses. And at this point, I'd like us to take a short tea break. To my right, which is to your left if you're facing me, we shall be doing that. But first, we take a break also on NTV on this live broadcast. We shall be having more of these discussions here in the county of Mombasa, where we are having a lot of insightful discourse in regards to the digital space. So be sure to keep on NTV, as well as keep checking out our social media pages. Our hashtag is Nation Digital Summit, and we're going to be having a lot of content coming out of there, out of here and on our online platforms. Thank you very much. So at this point, I'd like to invite our guests who are here physically to kindly, still in line with the COVID-19 containment protocols, go to the other side of this small barricade that's here, and there's going to be some tea for you to be served. It is now 11:23. We are trying to catch up with time, if I could put it that way. So I'd request that 11:35 we could be back here. If you not have finished your tea, you could just come and sit with it so that we can pick up the conversations and the presentations as